Hey, weirdos. I'm Elena.
I'm Ash.
And this is Morbid.
It sounded like you were going to say more. You're like, this is Morbid.
No, I was just saying it annoying.
No.
This is Morbid.
You're never annoying.
Never.
I had just quite the moment while we were getting set up here.
Yeah, Ash was knocking shit over. She was falling out of her seat.
Mikey's computer started and it did the like, mom, and I thought he burped and I was like, oh my God. And then I was like, wait, that's a computer.
That's a computer.
That's a computer. And then my fucking iced coffee went sailing across the galaxy.
And I'm just sitting over here in my
like,
seat with the microphone and my laptop, and I'm like, can we start?
She's like, I'm ready.
I'm ready
She's
to
like, this is
go.
why I don't do group projects. People like you, Ash.
People like you.
I always was that bitch at a group project, just like, wah!
Just a wreck
Hold
knocking
on.
shit over.
My iced coffee's falling.
It's fallen.
All right.
So we're in part 4.
Yeah, she is gonna make it 5 though.
Yeah, I apologize. I can't. I just can't cram it all into this episode. It would be too much for you to comprehend, too much for me to comprehend, really. And it's
Definitely
it's
too much
too
for me to
much.
comprehend.
It's just I'm not going to cram it into one episode just to do that. It would be not as good, I think, in my opinion. So I am going to make it 5, and I'm going to keep the Jack the Ripper stuff for part 5 because I want to find a ship manifest that I've been seeing rumblings of, but I can't seem to find the actual ship manifest, which seems to be a lot of the issue in the Jack the Ripper theories is a lot of people say stuff.
but it's not backed
But no
up.
one's got any documentation to back it up. So it's like, oh yeah, I think there was a Holmes on a ship on the way to UK, like during that whole thing. And you're like, whoa,
And then it's just like Brian.
where's that? And it's like, and it's also like Holmes was a very common name back then.
Exactly.
That's why he chose it. So it's like, I don't know about that.
Imagine that.
But we'll get to it. We're going to get further into that next episode. We will end at 5. Don't worry. I'm not going to take this like the longest series we've ever had.
we'll just tie it with Jack.
We'll just tie it with Jack. It's pretty much up there. But in this one, we're going to talk about several murders that he
Okay.
committed. Pretty brutal ones.
They
They're all
usually
pretty
are.
brutal, but these ones involve children. So
fuck
yeah,
you.
he's a real monster.
Yeah.
Like a real monster.
Well, I mean, he murdered his pregnant mistress, so
Yeah, he's fucking terrible.
that'll do it.
And the child in that situation.
Yep.
Poor Pearl.
I know. You know, I can't stop thinking about that name ever
Yeah,
since
it's such a cute name.
Yeah, and like those
Like
kind of
little
names
Pearl.
are coming back now.
Yeah, like old-timey names.
Cute old lady
Yeah.
names. Yeah.
But you know what? When we last left you guys, I'll give you a little recap because I know there's a lot to take in this series. So I think it's probably helpful to be like, this is what happened in the last one.
I need the recap. Even if you don't,
Even
I
if you
need it.
don't. Holmes married again.
Yep.
He's married again. Remember, he is still married to Myrta, still married to Clara.
And now Georgiana?
Georgiana is now his new wife. He fake married Minnie, who he killed, and her sister.
Yeah. He real married Georgiana, though,
He
right?
real married Georgiana.
In Colorado.
Yes.
Look at me.
There you go. So he has plotted. So he married again. He's plotted to take the inherited land from his new wife, Georgiana. She stands to get some inherited land from her dead grandmother. So he's plotting to take that. He has sent Benjamin Pitezel to Fort Worth, Texas to start getting the new Texas murder castle underway. Like he's ready to start this whole process over with a whole other murder castle. Like
Yeah.
same way.
Yep.
He's doing that on the land that he made Minnie Williams transfer into he and Benjamin's aliases names and then he murdered her. Now he's seeming to begin to turn on Benjamin a little bit after they both decided collectively to defraud an insurance company by faking Benjamin's death and using another corpse to pretend it's his.
I feel like it's not gonna be fake.
Yeah, it's looking like Benjamin's time as his lackey is coming to a tragic end at this point.
Had a feeling this episode was gonna be
Yeah.
Pite-centric.
Yeah,
Pite-centric.
it's not great for that entire family, to be quite honest. By the time Holmes and Georgiana arrived in Fort Worth to claim the land deeded to him by Minnie, Pitezel had already been there for a few weeks. He was there with his young son Howard, just getting things together. So when he first got to Texas, Pitezel had to receive the land deeded to his alias, Benton Lyman, and he had to transfer it back again to Holmes.
Okay.
Now, initially, I'll just give you a little rundown of how it initially happened so you remember. Minnie was to transfer it into Holmes's alias, who she didn't know. She thought this was another buyer. Then that alias of Holmes was deeding it into Benjamin Pitezel's alias of Benton Lyman.
Yes.
So now that Benton Lyman has it, he now has to deed it back into real Holmes's name.
It's funny. I wonder if any of, I don't know exactly how any of that works, but if somebody looking at that deed switching hands constantly, like, thought anything about that.
Yeah, I think, honestly, it's just the time period. They were able to get away with this a lot easier.
Nowadays,
now, obviously,
it would be, like, flagged, you would
the
think,
first
right?
time it went into an alias, I think people would be like, wait a second, what's going on there? Like, it would at least be, like, looked at. This time, instead of, like, H.H. Holmes, they put it into Harry Holmes's name. And this deed, this deed has been like boop, 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 boop. Like you said, like somebody, you would think somebody would maybe catch, but again, I think it's just the time period.
Even back then, though, I'm like, damn, you didn't think that was weird? It's been like 6 times.
Yeah, because like this deed has been around more times than a Broadway show.
Yeah,
like
for
it
real.
truly has. And from there, Pitezel selected a parcel of land on the corner of 2nd and Rusk Streets, and that's where they were going to put the murder castle. The castle was going to be built under the watch of construction superintendent H.M. Pratt. And guess who that was?
H.H. Holmes.
Yep, that was another one of his aliases. This is messy as fuck.
How did he keep track of them all?
He has 40 plus aliases.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. And he basically started doing the same shit he did in Chicago with the construction of this one. He wanted to build another murder castle, so he had to be weird and sneaky about it. So he would fire the workers every now and then to keep the plans from being fully realized. He did, however, switch up his game a little, and he started out actually paying people.
Huh.
Which is shocking for him.
That's weird.
But then he was right back on his bullshit and stopped.
He was like, that sucks.
Yeah, he was like, oh, I don't like that.
Ugh.
I do not like that. And he had a million excuses for why he couldn't pay on time. And he also went back to taking out loans and buying furniture and fixtures for the building on credit. And then he would just not pay. And then he would just hide the items from the creditors when they came to take them back.
This man gives me so much anxiety running from these creditors.
Yeah, and he's doing the most because he's made places in this castle now where he's hiding all these furnishings.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately for him, Holmes was not going to stick around in Texas long enough to see this castle actually come to fruition.
Ooh, what happened?
In the spring of 1894, he and Pitezel began that scheme. This is the beginning not of the insurance fraud scheme. It's the beginning of the scheme that would kind of unravel everything for him.
The scheme before the scheme, after that scheme, and around the time of that other scheme.
This scheme was they would travel around the state buying horses, and they would buy these horses with worthless promissory notes and deeds, not cash.
So like bad checks, essentially.
Basically. And then they would sell them for cash and move on before the seller figured out that they'd been scammed.
Oh.
But this plan fell apart when they were both arrested like idiots.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, once they were, because it was a shitty plan to begin with. Somebody was going to catch on. And once they were out on bond, investigators now were like, we should begin looking into these guys a little bit more. Because Holmes, they were like, yeah, he has a few things on his records here. So it was definitely going to bring more detectives on his tail.
And he doesn't want that.
And gathering up just some of their belongings and all the money that Holmes had managed to raise at this point for the castle, Holmes and Georgiana fled out of Texas for St. Louis with a brief stop in Denver along the way.
Okay.
So they're running all around.
And does she know? She knows about the scheme, obviously, because now she's on the run with him.
We don't know what she knew.
Okay.
It's one of those things where, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what she knew.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe she
I'm
didn't
not
know.
real sure.
Georgie didn't know.
She knew something, but I don't know what she knew.
Okay.
At this point, Holmes was on the run now for 2 crimes. He was on the run still from Chicago for the arson of the original.
Oh my God, I literally
murder
forgot
castle.
that.
Yes. And now he's on the run for horse thievery.
Horses and arson.
That I'm saying
the
horses
1800s
and fire.
of it all.
So you would think he would run as far away as possible from the 2 places he committed the 2 things he's on the run about,
One would
Chicago
think.
and Texas. But no, after he fled Texas, they went to St. Louis. And St. Louis is 4 hours from Chicago, technically.
Don't you think you would just like go to Europe?
And it's like, that's the thing. And it's 12 hours from Texas. Obviously, these two things are in like car, you know, which like at the time it's not really relevant. But it's like, they're not crazy far. It's not like across the country. You know what I mean? So it's like, that's weird that you didn't go further away, I guess.
That's the thing. Like, even try California.
Yeah, just or even like Massachusetts. Like, get out of there.
Yeah.
He's already been there. Like, go back. But, I mean, don't. I don't want you here. But
Well, he probably didn't want to because he has a wife there.
That's true.
And his new wife might not like that his old wife is there.
There's a lot going on. But he had to have a reason for like going to St. Louis. And that reason was that Georgiana was turning 25 in the fall. And that was when she was going to inherit the rest of the estate left to her by her grandmother in Indiana. So he was obviously planning to take the entire inheritance for himself alone. So he wanted to stay closer to Indiana to wait and then pounce on that when she turned 25.
And he was just going to like throw her down a chute.
He's so gross.
He really is.
While in St. Louis, he called himself, is it St. Louis or St. Louis?
I say St. Louis.
I say St. Louis. I'm sure I will get yelled at for that, but like,
I think it's probably interchangeable.
I'm asking Mikey about it.
I think it's St. Louis, but
Because
shit.
you know what I always think of Meet Me in St. Louis? Isn't that like a musical or something?
I don't know.
I feel like that's a musical.
I believe you. You have more musical knowledge than I do.
I'm like, am I thinking something different now? I feel like I need to confirm this with myself.
I think of fucking Jennifer Hudson in
That's what I
Sex
think
and
of.
the City.
Meet Me in St. Louis. Hold on, I'm gonna just check this really briefly.
Real time.
Doesn't have Judy Garland, isn't it? I'm pretty sure.
You're asking the wrong girly about a musical.
Yeah, it's a thing. But
Okay.
now I'm like, is it called Meet Me in St. Louis or Meet Me in St. Louis?
Throw on the pronouncenames.com for the people in the back. Pronouncenames.com.
Louis.
This is real
St.
time
Louis.
right
I feel
now.
like this is gonna prove me wrong and it's gonna be upsetting.
St. Louis.
Yeah.
Oh fuck, guys.
And I always believe that guy because he sounds like Jacques Pepin and I believe everything he says.
Too. I believe that, man.
I
All
do
right.
too.
So
St. Louis.
okay. So that French guy, I believe, and he said St. Louis. I don't know. It could be either one.
Maybe if it's like, if you're from there, you say it.
Maybe.
I don't
And
know.
I'm not from there, so it's not, you know, it's not my business.
We're from
but
Boston.
St. Louis, I'll say now. Okay. I've said it both ways now, so I've covered all bases. So here we are. After settling in St. Louis.
In the Saint place.
Yeah. So while he's there, he called himself H.M. Howard.
Are you sure it's not Howard?
Howard, maybe. Howard.
Howard.
As H.M. Howard, he bought a drugstore again on the corner of 14th and North Market Streets. Because remember, he's taken money that he raised for the murder castle. He didn't do that. He's run to St. Louis, and now he has bought another place, a drugstore to run.
Okay.
When he
It's a
bought it,
quote-unquote run.
yeah, quote unquote, run into the ground. When he bought it, he told the seller that he just wanted something to quote unquote occupy his attention, and that he really didn't care a lot about profits because he was just he's well off. He doesn't give a shit about
He's
that.
in it for the fun.
He's in it for the fun of a drugstore, the fun that a drugstore can provide. That's what he
CVS
is.
is a great fucking time. All right, you can get anything you need there.
I'm saying that's what he's in for it. And he used a little cash to buy it, but then he bought the rest of it with ding, 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 useless promissory notes and stock.
Also, like, you have the money to spend and like plenty left over. Just do it the right way, brother.
He's greedy as fuck.
him.
He is Scrooge McDuck.
Literally.
He is swimming in a bunch of gold coins, and he's not giving them up.
But he's not cute. Scrooge McDuck
he's
is.
not. That's true. But yeah, he did the same old thing. He bought
Ridiculous.
furniture and fixings for this store on credit, no intention of paying for it.
Stupid.
Soon after arriving and settling there, Benjamin Pitezel joined them. He had moved there with his wife Carrie and their 5 children.
Oh.
Yeah. This was when Holmes let Benjamin's wife Carrie in on the plan that he and her husband were working on. They needed her help with it.
Uh-oh.
Their plan was to defraud the Fidelity Mutual Insurance Company by faking Ben's death. they needed her in on it because they needed to fake his death. And they
Yeah.
needed her to help.
You're not gonna fool Fidelity
No.
Mutual though.
And they did not.
I don't feel.
But meanwhile, Holmes was also already on the path of selling the pharmacy and then running away from the massive debt that he had compiled with the pharmacy.
Everywhere.
So he's just like, oops, that sucked. And now we're going to run away from that. And it's on to the next thing. It's just amazing the anxiety
right.
filled life he must have lived.
That he
it is
created for
constant.
himself.
And he just keeps inviting.
Yeah.
But I don't think I think in the end it seems like he became anxious and he became
had to have.
paranoid, and it started to, in the beginning I think he was having a fucking blast with it because I don't think anything was catching up to him in the beginning.
Well, and I think in the beginning there was less to keep track of.
And then it just kept piling on, and now he's basically like negating states out of his
Right.
available paths of escape.
He's
Like,
snowballing. Like it's
Yeah.
getting the mess is getting bigger and bigger as it rolls down the fucking hill.
he's blacklisting himself out of several states. And it's like, soon there's not going to be many left, my
and
guy.
they're all like in the middle.
Yeah, like the
I'm like,
Midwest
yeah.
happening. But Holmes and Pitezel found a buyer for the drugstore. But in order to buy the store, the man had to take a loan from a supplier. And when he did this, he had to promise that supplier that they would be his main supplier. That was kind of part of the whole thing.
That makes sense.
And that was in exchange for the money they were going to pay. The problem, however, was that Holmes already had a mortgage on the store, which meant that any additional mortgage on the same property would have been illegal and invalid. So when the new buyer became aware of the situation, he immediately alerted authorities. And he was like, this guy is trying to fucking scam me. And Holmes was arrested on fraud charges.
Girl.
Oops.
And this is in St. Louis, St. Louis.
St. Louis, St. Louis. This is when he was, so he bought this drugstore, had no intention of running it properly, did all the same shit, bought it with worthless notes, bought the fixings for it with all bullshit credit that he wasn't paying. And then he tries to sell it to somebody illegally, and he doesn't think that this person, he thought he was so much smarter than everybody around him. It's pretty par for the course with serial killers. I feel like they always think they're smarter than everybody, and no one's gonna outsmart me. And it's like, you're a fucking idiot.
It's
like
narcissism.
you're not smart.
No.
You're cunning, and you
there's
are
a
a
difference.
shithead, but you are not smart.
Right.
Like there's not. You're an idiot. And it's like, and you're greedy. You're gluttonous, and it's gonna catch up to you.
It will always catch up.
And it does. Because this guy who was buying the pharmacy was like, fuck you. You're trying to swindle me, you dick. So he called the authorities and boom, arrested.
Authorities.
Authorities.
Hello, this man's trying to scam me.
This man is trying to swindle me.
They're like, sir, this is St. Louis, Louis. Why you got an accent like
are
that?
you all right?
This is not Great Britain.
Like a fake like transatlantic accident that like doesn't exist.
He's like, Madonna?
Yeah, what's going on right now? So is this like a bit? So he's like, no, I'm
this
really
SNL?
I'm really upset. So he was in jail for 2 weeks and was finally bonded out by Georgiana.
Oh, man.
That's
yeah,
why
because she
I
got
say-
her. Yeah.
I don't know what Georgiana knew.
You know what
she
we say
knew some
about-
things though.
We say about Georgiana,
I say I'm just gonna
Scratch
stroke
my chin.
a little bit about it. I'm not gonna say I don't know what she knew because I'm not in Georgiana's head.
I'm going to put my sunglasses on, roll up my window, and say, I don't know her.
I don't know her, so I don't know. But the day she bonded him out, they went to the train station and were intending to flee right back to Chicago.
But you're wanted there too, brother.
And what they were going to do there was regroup, kind of formulate the next part of a giant fucked up plan. But their plan was not going to happen because before the train even left the fucking station, they were stopped by a police sergeant. And the police sergeant said that he was afraid the proposed trip would have to be postponed. And then he placed Holmes under arrest again.
After he literally just got out like that morning.
Literally, like, got out, walked to the train station, and they were like, no, sir.
They're like, back to jail. This is
Now-
Monopoly.
According to news reports at the time, Georgiana, quote, protested in the most indignant manner and became almost hysterical and denounced the arrest as persecution.
Georgie, calm down.
So off he goes back to
create a
jail.
scene.
And they set bail at $800, which at that point was $50,000 at present.
They were like, you're fucked up and we're not letting you out of here.
No one had that cash at the time. So Georgiana went to Indiana and retrieved the deed to some of the land she was going to be inheriting. and that was going to be accepted as sufficient collateral.
Okay.
And it's old-timey. They were going to hand over a deed to land.
Makes sense.
He was released from custody the next day.
Damn.
So he had only spent a couple of weeks in jail before that, but he made some networking moves once he was in there because
he did.
we know Holmes always is closing.
Just working on a pyramid scheme, even in the walls of the prison.
He's an idiot, but he's a hardworking idiot.
Cunning.
He connected with other inmates and he started getting them into future schemes with him, like promising them things that he couldn't deliver.
Of course.
One of these convicts was a outlaw and bank robber named Marion Hedgepeth. Holmes told him about his scheme to defraud the insurance company by faking Pitezel's death, passing off another body as his, and then he was like, we're going to flee the country after that. Because I've kind of used up a lot of these states and I should probably get out. Now, according to Hedgepeth, Holmes offered to bring him in on the scheme. But he was like, no, I'm good. Like, even he was like, I think you're dumb. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think this is going to work out for you. There was something about Holmes that he was concerned about. And like, there was also like a pesky little detail that Marion was serving a 25-year sentence. So like,
He don't really know how we're going to cut you into this.
he wasn't going to be scheming outside of those walls anytime soon.
Not for a while.
But he did direct Holmes to a very
Respected?
morally gray lawyer
Oh, a lawyer.
by the name of Jepta Howe. This lawyer agreed to help Holmes and Pitezel pull off the insurance scheme once they arrived in Philadelphia.
That'll get you debarred.
He was morally gray, maybe an understatement.
The morally corrupt FR.
Very unscrupulous, I would say.
Oh, I love that
But
word.
yeah,
That's a good word.
unscrupulous. But Hedgepeth later told reporters, quote, I am now convinced that he would sooner or later have murdered me had I been able to accompany him on his intended trip abroad.
Which one said this?
Hedgepeth, the
Oh,
outlaw.
25-year sentence.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think you had to worry. You weren't getting out of jail, my guy.
You're
but
fine.
So on July 29th, Benjamin Pitezel left St. Louis, and he told his wife, I'm just covering my bases.
Yeah, you know.
He told his wife he was taking a brief trip to purchase some lumber in Chicago, but he was actually headed to Philadelphia where he was going to meet up with Holmes.
Yeah.
Now, meanwhile, as soon as Holmes was bonded out of jail, he and Georgiana left St. Louis, and headed to Philadelphia to meet with Benjamin Pitezel. Along the way, they stopped in Indiana to visit Georgiana's mother, where Holmes told her they were going to be traveling to Germany to look after his uncle's property.
Woof.
So she shouldn't be alarmed at all if she doesn't hear from Georgiana for a while.
Mm-hmm.
He was fully planning on murdering Georgiana.
And she was fully planning on spending the rest of her
Yeah.
life with him, even like in his outlawish ways.
Yeah. Now, Georgiana did stay behind in Indiana a little bit,
Good.
just for a little while, just to like visit with family, while Holmes went straight to Philadelphia after this to start the whole scam. So Benjamin Pitezel got to Philadelphia on August 17th, 1894. Within a couple of days, he opened a business, and it was a patent business under the name B.F. Perry, another alias.
Another one.
Yeah, this is what Holmes had told him to do. Once he'd established himself, the plan was that Howe, the unscrupulous, the morally gray
Yes.
lawyer,
Yep.
was going to help them get a fresh corpse that was similar looking to Benjamin.
Why does this lawyer have a corpse connect?
Not real sure. A lot of people had corpse connects back then.
Yeah, we don't love that.
The plan was to place this body, this look-alike corpse, in the patent laboratory in the building that he owned. Then cause an explosion in the building, disfiguring the corpse so much that they could pass it off as Pitezel's body without a lot of suspicion. And then once they'd faked his death, Pitezel was going to go into hiding, and Holmes and Pitezel's wife, Carrie, would split the $10,000 insurance payout.
Yeah, right, baby. Holmes
Yeah.
is taking that full 10.
Sounds great. But
He's gonna murder all you.
Yeah. On the morning of September 1st, the doorbell rang at the apartment Holmes was sharing with Georgiana. And he went downstairs to open the door.
And it was the police.
He came back inside and he told Georgiana that the man at the door was from the Pennsylvania Railroad Company. He said he had been working with them on a contract to sell copiers. Because remember, he had a weird copier business at one point.
No, I literally forgot that.
He it was a fake copier
Yeah.
business, like ABC copiers or something like that. But he's like, oh yeah, it's this guy. He's like works for the railroad company. Just like, we have a contract. We're gonna sell copiers. That's what he told Georgiana. That's why I say I don't know what Georgiana knew. She knew some things, but he would lie to her about a lot of things.
Totally.
Because later, Holmes told investigators that this man was actually Benjamin Pitezel at the door. And he had come to tell Holmes that unfortunately, his youngest child, Wharton, was sick. And his wife had asked him to actually return to St. Louis, and help with the children.
Yeah.
So he was like, I can't do this scheme with you. I have to leave and take care of my kid.
Uh-oh.
This was really going to fuck up Holmes's plans, and immediately he made the decision that Pitezel was not leaving Philly.
Oh, shit.
So this man comes to Holmes and says, my youngest child is sick. And Holmes is like, you're not leaving, and I'm going to make sure.
Do you think that he was worried that Pitezel was starting to freak out and was going to, like, alert authorities?
He was probably
Like
worried of
chickening
that,
out?
and he was pissed.
Yeah,
he
because
was pissed.
his plan was fucked up.
One thing about Holmes was like, don't double cross him, don't fuck with him, don't fuck with his schemes. If you even show slight backing out and even
Like
for valid
hesitation.
reasons, even if you're saying my kid is sick, I gotta leave, he's like, betrayal. Like he immediately looks at that as like, you don't value our shit here as much as you should.
I know
and
other people
you have to
like
die
that
now.
too.
Yeah.
That don't understand when your kid is sick.
Yeah.
And then they're like, betrayal, fuck
But like
you.
betrayal. I'm gonna fuck you over now.
Yeah, put that on a list somewhere.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
So that's exactly what happened. Was he was like, oh, your kid is sick? I'm going to fuck your world up now.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay. He's just trying to go home and be a dad. But like, okay.
But like, fuck him, right?
Yeah, fuck him. So I think he was just really fucking mad that he fucked up his plan. And he figured that actually killing Benjamin would probably be easier than faking it at this point. And since he was mad already, he was like, I want to kill him now. So
Then you have to worry about his whole family, which I have a feeling he will.
yeah, he's not too worried about his whole family. In his later confession, Holmes said that Pitezel sent, quote, discouraging letters purporting to be from his wife that caused Pitezel to begin drinking heavily.
Okay.
Then he claimed that on the 2nd, September 2nd, he showed up at the B.F. Perry laboratory and found Pitezel in a drunken stupor. That's what he's claiming in his confession. So the next day, he said he was upset about his wife and what was going on, and then we found him in a drunken stupor at the laboratory. And he said, quote, this was an easy matter, as I was acquainted with his habits, and so sure was I of finding him thus incapacitated, that when the day came upon which it was convenient for me to kill him, even before I went to his house, I packed my trunk and made other arrangements to leave Philadelphia in a hurried flight immediately after his death.
Wow.
So he's literally like, it was very convenient for me to kill him the next day because I knew he was so upset about his child that he was going to be drunk at the laboratory.
And I was already on my way out.
And I was already ready to kill him, so I figured I'd just pack everything up and be ready to go.
You got a friend
Yeah,
in him.
like, holy shit.
Jesus Christ.
So according to the confession, Holmes said he entered the building, he went to the 2nd floor, and that's where he found Pitezel passed out. He said, quote, only one difficulty presented itself. It was necessary for me to kill him in such a manner that no struggle or movement of his body should occur.
That's the only issue. Not that you're
No,
murdering your longtime
not at all.
Friend and associate.
Basically, and father of 5.
Yeah, seriously.
Basically, he had to kill him and make it look like an accident or suicide instead of murder, and that was his concern. So he tied his hands and feet, and then he soaked his entire body in I think it was benzene? It was like some chemical, and then he just burned him alive.
Yeah, that'll look like suicide.
Burned him alive.
That's so horrific.
He burned this man alive. Like, didn't light the building on fire, just burned him alive first, and then was going to light the building on fire. So didn't even bother to light the building on fire and leave. He burned this man alive in front of him.
I feel like he had to have done something like so fucked up like that to somebody before. Like
Yeah.
more obviously putting somebody in that enclosed room is fucked up, but even like more than that. Because you don't just burn your fucking friend and associate and just be like, meh, moving on.
Well, moving on. Well, in his confession, he said, so horrible of this torture that in writing of it, I have been tempted to attribute his death to some humane means, not with a wish to spare myself, but because I fear that it will not be believed that one can be so heartless and depraved.
So do you think he really did do that then? Or do you think he's bluffing?
He definitely did that.
Oh, he definitely did?
It's like
they
absolutely, it's
found
like
him.
proven. Yeah. So once the body was sufficiently disfigured and basically burned beyond recognition, Holmes claimed that he removed the bindings from his wrists and ankles. And then he said he, quote, poured into his stomach 1 1/2 ounces of chloroform, so that at the time of the postmortem examination, the coroner's physician would be warranted in reporting that the death was accidental.
What?
So once he'd burned the body, Holmes threw things around and ransacked the room to make it look like an accidental explosion had caused damage to the remains. Then he went further and he had like a detailed narrative to the scene. He broke the bottle of chloroform and benzene that he had used, then left an extinguished match near the spilled liquid. So it made it look like Pitezel had attempted to light his pipe too close to the flammable liquids and caused an explosion.
That actually is like I would never think to do something like that.
It kind of worked.
It makes sense.
Like it was this is what I mean. Like he's a fucking idiot, but he's
cunning.
But unfortunately, he's smart when it comes to fucking terrible shit.
Street smarts.
Yeah. Now, with Pitezel dead and murdered and the scene looking to be an accident, he rushed back to the apartment and told Georgiana that he closed the deal on the copiers and they would be leaving for Indianapolis immediately. So he'd already set that whole thing up.
My God.
Oh, I closed that deal that I told you about yesterday.
And in his mind, he's like, yeah, I closed the deal.
Yeah, I closed the deal. He also told her that if anyone asked, she should tell them that they were bound for Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And he explained this by saying that the St. Louis stuff wasn't fully settled. And if too many people knew where they were, he could be arrested again. Mm-hmm. So and she was like, okay. So off they went that evening and they boarded the 10:25 p.m. train to Indianapolis.
You have to imagine she probably was scared of him
to some
degree.
Sure.
And that's probably why she didn't, if she didn't question things.
She wasn't going to ask. She was just like, you know what? I don't want to be part of this.
Let me keep my nose clean.
Now, 2 days later, Pitezel's body was discovered by Eugene Smith, who was a local inventor in the area who'd been in to talk to and see B.F. Perry, Pitezel, a week or so earlier. Now, he had stopped in to speak with Perry a few times since the man had opened the patent laboratory, and he was really excited because they had kind of talked about him making money off of some of his inventions. Now they were going to patent some of them. So the morning of September 4th, he tried to walk into the patent office to speak to him, but the door was locked. This was strange to him because it was during working hours, so he called the police. They sent Officer George Lewis, and he broke down the door. He found Benjamin Pitezel's rotting body on the second floor of the apartment. And as far as anyone knew, B.F. Perry was last seen alive on Saturday, September 1st. That's when the last people had seen him alive besides Holmes. Mm-hmm. I think it was a delivery boy that had brought a message that day. That was the last person who had seen him. That message that was brought to him, it's like even worse, because that was a telegram, they believe, from Carrie Pitezel informing him of Wharton's illness. So they think the last person to see him besides Holmes was that little message boy, the telegram boy. And that telegram was the real telegram saying that Wharton was sick.
Oh, no.
It's just like really sad because he was trying to get home to that child. Pitezel was discovered, quote, lying on his back on the floor with his right hand clasped over his heart and what appeared to be blood about his head. Given the way that the scene looked to detectives, it was pretty much assumed that he had been holding in his right hand a bottle of benzene and was in the act of lighting his pipe when a terrible explosion occurred, knocking him to the floor. The body was brought in for an autopsy, and the coroner, he was not so sure. He could not identify the cause of death. He was like, I can't say for sure what this cause of death is. I feel like it could be something else.
Why did he pour chloroform into his stomach?
I think it was like, I don't know if it was because it meant like it would look like he inhaled the chloroform when that happened. He did it too close to the liquids.
Okay.
Or maybe he was trying to make it look like a suicide as well. Like maybe it would muddle the findings a little bit.
Okay.
There was an inquest, and the coroner, Dr. William Scott, testified, quote, I went to the house expecting to find a man burned to death or blown to death by an explosion. Instead, we found the face discolored and distorted or full of pools. The odor was terrible. His tongue was swollen and stuck out of his mouth, and red fluid issued from his mouth. Any little pressure on the stomach or over the chest here would cause this fluid to flow more rapidly. It just didn't make sense to him as it was being presented as an accident.
Right.
He said the state of the room didn't really jive with him either. He thought it was very staged. It didn't look like an explosion caused everything. He said it looked like somebody had just thrown shit around.
Yeah.
But it was the chloroform in the stomach that actually set off the most alarm bells.
I had a feeling because it's just random as fuck.
So, yeah. So, as a coroner, he was aware that if Pitezel had ingested the chloroform before his death, the harsh chemical would have caused a lot of irritation to the stomach lining. But when the stomach contents was observed, there was no irritation. That's because it was put in his body after his death, and it was clear. Now, Scott couldn't be certain what specifically had caused the man's death because it was so badly disfigured, but they were pretty sure it had happened suddenly and was not the result of an explosion. Now, despite this testimony by this coroner, the jury delivered, quote, a verdict of death from inhalation of flames or from some poison, the character of which is unknown.
I can understand why the jury was confused because there's just so many elements to that to understand.
Well, and what's worse is his body was held at the morgue for a few days, and then it was just buried in an unmarked potter's grave.
Oh, because nobody knew that
he's not. Nobody knows he's Pitezel. So at the time, it's kind of seeming like his plan is going to work here because he's going to be able to use this,
right?
You know.
Yep.
So while this was all happening, and a jury is trying to determine whether this man they know as B.F. Perry was murdered or killed by accident, Holmes is on his way back from Indianapolis to St. Louis now, where he's going to meet Carrie Pitezel. Because remember, she was there.
God.
She was trying to get Pitezel back to St. Louis.
And she knows about the plan.
Now, unfortunately for Holmes, word of Pitezel's death had reached the family before he could get there to break the news. And he found Carrie Pitezel inconsolable.
Oh.
Like, inconsolable.
I can't imagine.
Now, Holmes decided, because people knew that, like, he was using that alias, so it was getting around
people
to his
back
family.
home.
Yeah.
Knew.
So Holmes decided to just lie to Carrie and insisted that her husband was actually alive and that he was in hiding until they were going to be able to get that $10,000.
So he was basically like, no, this is the
No,
scheme.
the plan is going according, like, don't worry, that we want you to believe that it was him.
Right.
That's the whole plan. But they said, we need to get the $10,000 first. Once we get that from the insurance, then he'll come out of hiding.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said, but in order to do that, someone has to go to Philadelphia and claim the body as Benjamin Pitezel.
Okay.
He's so fucking evil.
He is.
So
'Cause
Carrie
he's giving her hope that
Yeah.
she's gonna find her husband again.
Yeah. Now, Carrie was concerned about traveling to St. Louis to
She has a sick
Philadelphia
kid.
because her child is sick. And also, he didn't want her to go there because that could muddle some things. So he was like, who can we get that can be like a little bit down a level from Carrie?
A little more innocuous.
So Holmes convinced her to send in Pitezel's teenage daughter, Alice, in her
he
place.
was gonna use a kid.
And he even claimed that the girl could stay with his cousin,
No.
Minnie Williams.
No. She's dead.
Yep.
Nope.
While she was in Philadelphia.
No.
This way, he could still stay on track to get the money from insurance. But in the meantime, Jephthah Howe, the gray...
Why are there so many characters?
The morally gray lawyer.
The morally corrupt Jorah Howe.
He started drafting documents that would give him power of attorney over Carrie that would be necessary to claim the entire $10,000 for Holmes.
Not a POA.
Nope. So 6 days after his death, Fidelity Mutual Insurance received a telegram reporting that the dead man from Philadelphia, known as B.F. Perry, was probably Benjamin Pitezel.
This is so much. How did you even fucking research
It's
this?
insane. And they said Benjamin Pitezel has actually a large insurance policy with your insurance company. So the death was still looked at as suspicious. So agents at Fidelity Mutual were like, we would like a little more information before we pay out this policy.
Right.
So they looked further and saw that the only other name listed on the policy was H.H. Holmes.
His actual name.
His actual name. So they went about finding Holmes, and to do this, they sent a letter to Myrta in Wilmot. His wife.
Alive?
Myrta's still alive.
Yeah, she's still alive, right? Okay.
I don't know what happened there, but after a little bit of a delay, Holmes did get in touch with Fidelity Mutual. I don't know if Myrta just called him and was like, hey, I just got this letter.
Was he like,
going
do
on?
you know it? Was he keeping in touch with her?
I think he was slightly.
So she was still under the guise
Only-
that they were married?
Only a little bit. I think it was one of those things where it was like she probably knew that he was gone.
Yeah.
But like, it's weird.
Okay.
But
My oh my.
Yeah, exactly. My oh my is correct. Now, Holmes replies to the Fidelity Insurance Company and tells the agent that he'd only just learned that the body was in Philadelphia. So he said, I'll go there immediately and we will identify this man and get back to you.
Okay.
Now, again, Holmes wouldn't allow Carrie to identify the body, and Carrie really didn't want to leave her kid anyway.
And she probably wouldn't have wanted to see that body.
Yeah, so he told the insurance company that she was too ill to come, and he was going to have to go. But they were like, no, you can't just go. And that's when they were like, you need to bring a family member. And he was like, I'll bring Alice.
Especially because he's the one listed. So, of course, he's going to be like, yeah, that's him.
Yeah, that's totally fine. On September 20th, Holmes met Alice Pitezel in Jepta Howe in Philadelphia. And she wrote a letter to Carrie, her mother, later. And she said of meeting Holmes, she referred to him as Mr. Howard. She said, quote, I don't like him to call me babe and child and dear and all such trash.
She's like, fuck this guy.
She thought he was a pig.
Yeah, he was.
She knew right away.
She got his number.
Yep. A few days later, Alice and Howe, the lawyer, show up at the Fidelity Mutual office. Holmes joins them there. And they all provided the agents with some notable things that would basically identify. But yeah, exactly. I was trying to think of the word. That would identify this as Benjamin Pitezel.
Okay.
Things of this were he had a mole on his back, he had a scar on his leg, he had a twisted fingernail that had occurred out of an accident.
Oh, that's interesting.
And he had very unusual dentition. He had a lot of spaces in his teeth.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of very particular things.
Is dentition just what your teeth look like?
Yeah.
I've never heard that word. I like
really?
it. Yeah.
It's a nice word. It feels
dentition.
like dentition.
You have nice dentition over there.
Anything that ends in shun,
Yeah.
I always feel has a nice
Mm-hmm.
The body had been exhumed now, and when they got to the cemetery, it had been moved to a shed and was being examined by Dr. Mattern.
Nice. In the shed.
And that happened a lot. That happened a lot in the Jack the Ripper case.
I know.
Actually.
I remember you
Lots
just
of
always being
sheds.
like, yeah, and the body in the shed.
Yeah, and the coroner's just doing an autopsy in a shed.
Vibing in the shed.
Dr. Mattern was the other coroner who was with Dr. Scott that did the original autopsy. By that time, his remains were in an advanced state of decomposition.
One would think.
And they were given the description, the unique marks on the body, but Mattern insisted the state of the remains kind of made it impossible to positively identify the body. At one point, the doctor couldn't find the big scar that they were talking about that was supposed to be on his leg. Holmes was present for this, and he got frustrated and impatient, and he grabbed the leg, apparently, rubbed the flesh so that the burned layer of skin moved away, and then revealed the scar.
He's a fucking monster.
And then was like, do you see? This is Benjamin Pitezel, we told you. Was pissed and was like, here it is. I figured it out.
Oh my God.
Who?
Who
does
us
that?
Show us how money hungry you are without
Whomst
doing that.
among us does that?
Not I.
Not even the coroner was willing to do that. He was like, no, okay. But at that point, they were like, all right,
And
sure.
poor Alice being there and having to
Yeah.
see that. That's her father.
Yep. And they were like, okay, cool that you think it's him. Alice, what do you think? You're the determining factor. If you say
Right.
this is not your father, it's not.
She must have been scared.
Yeah. So apparently, again, Pitezel had that unique set of teeth.
Yeah.
So a lot of spaces, which were very easily identifiable. And apparently, Dr. Mattern was the only one who actually gave a shit about Alice. And they had to present this body to her and have her look at the teeth. And they said before doing that, he removed, quote, as well as he could, everything that was repulsive from the mouth.
Aw.
And then he asked Alice to look at the teeth. And she said she looked into his mouth and she told the doctor that the teeth, quote, appeared to be like her papa's. And then she left the shed
That's
immediately.
horrific.
Now, the agents from Fidelity Mutual waited a full day, and then they let Alice and Howe know that they found Alice's identification satisfactory. So typically these kind of claims are very slow and methodical to be processed. But
For good reason.
lawyer Howe there, he appealed to the agents and he said the Pitezels are very poor. They have a sick kid. They could use the money as soon as possible. Can you expedite it?
Yeah.
So after a little discussion, they agreed to pay the claim immediately, and they took out any of the costs that they had to use to identify the remains.
You know, everyone in that Fidelity office was like, what the fuck is going on
They were
here?
like, some shit is going down.
The break room was popping off
It
at
was, the
lunch.
water cooler was bubbling.
The coffee was filled to the brim.
Yeah, they were all like, something stinks
They're
here.
like, you want to go to the pub later to talk about this shit?
Seriously. So right away, a check was written to Carrie Pitezel, but that check was given right to Holmes. And the check was in the amount of $9,715.85 because they took out the costs that they had to use to exhume and identify the body.
But back then, that must have been so much
A
money.
lot of money. So with that check, Holmes immediately boarded a train for St. Louis, St. Louis, and he was going to deliver that check to Carrie, but have her immediately give the money back to him. So he wrote a letter to the company also, by the way, and he wrote it as Carrie, thanking them for the prompt payment. And they used that letter in promotional materials for a little while.
Oh my God.
Yikes.
They used a fucking letter from
Yeah.
H.H. Holmes.
They had no idea.
Ole nole.
Now, Holmes's plan had always been to claim the money from the insurance scam and then flee to Europe.
Right.
And that's where he was, none of the creditors, nobody was going to be able to get him there. So it's strange that during this return trip from Philadelphia, he sent a letter to his brother in Gilmanton to let him know that he would be returning to Gilmanton in the coming days,
I didn't
where he was
even
from.
remember that he had a brother.
Yeah. Holmes told his brother he'd been on a trip to Minneapolis in 1888. And when he was there, a train crashed. And for the 6 years that followed, he'd been suffering from amnesia.
Incorrect.
And he said he'd regained his memory and he was planning to return home to just resume his life with Clara and Robbie.
What is this about?
What?
Because he had, no, he didn't have any plans to do
he
that.
had no plans to
Was
do
he just
that.
bored on a Tuesday?
Just being a dick. Now, when Holmes arrived in St. Louis, St. Louis, with the money from the insurance payout, he gave $2,500 to Jepta Howe as payment. I'm surprised
Shocking,
he
I
even
know.
did that. And he only gave $500 to Carrie. And he said that the remaining $6,700 for himself was because her husband had owed him money and had outstanding debts, and he was going to take it.
What a piece of absolute dung.
Yeah.
Cow
and she just had to
dung.
accept it.
Elephant dung. How about that?
Now, what's worse is Carrie's husband, Benjamin, now has to be in hiding. And they have to go get him out of hiding. But he's still in hiding right now. And she's got 5 kids that she's trying to support that now she has almost no income doing.
Right.
So she's panicking. She's like, I can't do this.
Oh my God.
And Holmes like, you know what? It might be better if I took your 12-year-old Nellie and your 8-year-old Howard and they could come live with their sister Alice in Indiana for a little while. And they can be looked
What?
after by my cousin, Minnie Williams,
Who's dead?
until Benjamin comes out of hiding and then you can all rejoin together.
So what you're telling me is he was like, I'm going to kill these kids.
Now, Carrie Pitezel agreed because she probably had no
'Cause
other
she's
choice at
desperate,
that point.
yeah.
And on September 27th, she transferred custody of Nellie and Howard to Holmes. And he sent a telegram to Alice in Indianapolis telling her to be ready to leave the following day because they were going to go stay in Indiana. They were going to go stay with Minnie Williams. Now, on September 28th, Alice met Holmes and her 2 younger siblings at the train station in Indianapolis, and the 4 of them went to Cincinnati.
Okay.
I know.
Now we're in Ohio.
Once there, he registered at the Atlantic House under the name Alexander Cook. And he got the kids settled, and then he wired Georgiana and asked that she come to join them all. So he explained that he had come into some money, because remember, Georgiana was staying with some family in Indiana. So he explained that he had come into some money from someone purchasing the land in Fort Worth.
Okay.
I know there's a lot. That's what I mean when I say I'm not cramming everything into one episode, because
You
there's
can't.
enough with just this.
No, there is.
Just enough places, enough people. He's traveling everywhere.
Do you see my eyes every now and again just
Yes.
adding it up in my
You're
head?
just,
Like,
like,
okay,
watching
that's
it.
where we are.
And that's why I'm like, it just needs to be consumed in bits,
Small
so that
bits.
you can understand where he is at any given time.
No, I'm happy about the way that you're doing it
It's
because I would turn
It's a
off
lot.
at some point and just
Yeah.
be like, I don't know.
This one's different from Jack the Ripper, obviously, in a lot of ways, but like
very layered.
Jack the Ripper was at least like Whitechapel.
Yeah,
It's
right.
like we are in Whitechapel.
We're in fucking Massachusetts, then we're in
but
New
here
Hampshire,
we're
then
like-
we're in Ohio, then we're in Philadelphia,
Literally.
then we're in so many other places.
Colorado, Chicago,
Texas.
Indiana, Cincinnati, St. Louis. Like,
See, What I knew of the H.H. Holmes story was just the murder
Just
castle.
Chicago.
Like, that's all I knew.
Because he's known as like the Chicago serial killer.
But really,
Like,
he
that's
was
it.
the
He was
everywhere killer.
He was. Now, it was at this time that Holmes was becoming really paranoid. As you can imagine, a lot is being piled on now.
And I feel like he let too many people in on the schemes.
Way too many people. He's done it across way too many states.
Yup.
He's caused way too many wires to cross.
He's been in jail a few times now.
Yeah, he's starting to crack a little bit. And according to Adam Seltzer, who we linked that source in the show notes, Holmes claimed that he received tips that detectives were on his tail.
Right.
And it was starting to get to him. I don't know how much he knew, whether he was, just operating purely out of paranoia or he was actually had the facts. But he was being pursued by a lot of different agencies.
I believe it.
And now the Fidelity Mutual Insurance Company was added to that list because now they were like, something's awry here.
Now, what made them feel that way?
So I'll tell you. So in early October, the lead detective with the Fidelity Mutual Insurance Company, W.E. Gary, got a telegram. Not a telegram. This telegram was from Lawrence Harrigan, who was the chief of the St. Louis Police. This telegram from the chief of police was letting him know that a prisoner in St. Louis had come forward with information that basically alluded to the fact that the Fidelity Insurance Company had recently been defrauded in a big way.
I knew that motherfucker was going to come forward and try to get some shit off his 25-year sentence.
Yeah.
Right?
It was from Marion Hedgepeth,
Yep.
Holmes'
That's the
cellmate.
thing. Why would you not
Why you
think,
trust him?
if you're going to tell anybody, tell somebody with 3 years so they have something to
Exactly.
look forward to.
But this guy's got nothing to lose. He doesn't give a shit.
And everything to gain because he's giving information, thinking
Exactly.
let me help you out and get a couple years off my sentence.
Yep. And the telegram gave all the details of the scheme that Holmes had told him about, how they were going to fake Pitezel's death for money. And at the time, he had offered Hedgepeth $500 for his part in it, which would be to recommend an attorney of ill repute.
Which he did.
Hedgepeth claimed that he really didn't think Holmes would attempt it. He thought he was just all talk.
Bluffing.
But then a few weeks later, his lawyer, Howe, told him, quote, that he had never heard of a finer or smoother piece of work and that he was sure to work, and that Howard, H.H. Holmes, was one of the smoothest and slickest man that he had ever heard tell of. So Howe was already singing his praises weeks later. So Marion Hedgepeth likely felt compelled to inform authorities of this just to get something out of it, obviously. He was also salty because he was never given his $500. And it seemed to him like every one of the schemers had just got what they needed from him and then abandoned ship.
Right. He's like, I got snacks to buy on this commissary.
So he was out to fuck them over. But detectives did believe him and the details he gave. And the superiors at Fidelity Mutual, they thought actually that Hedgepeth may be lying. And a few days had passed before they finally were willing to believe this, and that they were like, you know what, we're going to give W.E. Gary, the detective for Fidelity Insurance.
Thank you.
They're going to give him approval to pursue Holmes. Okay. But it took a few days for them to investigate it because they had just paid this out. They don't want to believe that they just got fucked over.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
So they looked into it and they were like, I think this guy's telling the truth.
Yeah, what'd you say? It was $9,000, right?
Yeah, it was a lot of money. It was almost 10. It was actually almost 10. It was 9,700, I think, somewhere in there.
Round up.
But Holmes had been lucky that his previous issues with the law were under so many aliases, and there had been so much time between them that they were kind of tough to connect the dots. Mm-hmm. But this scheme was so fresh and so big that it was much easier to trace, and he had left too many missing pieces. So now Detective Gary is on Holmes's tail. And
Why is Detective Gary so funny?
Detective Gary's hilarious.
I think all I can think of is Gary from Below Deck.
Yeah, no, any Mr. Gary, that's Detective Gary, it just doesn't sound right. But now Holmes is having to shuttle the Pitezel children all over Cincinnati for the remainder of this time.
Yeah.
And then he ships them to Indianapolis for the first few weeks of October. And in Indianapolis, Holmes and Georgiana checked into some very fancy, swanky hotel.
Penthouse situation.
Yeah, and they had the Pitezel children at a hotel down the block. and they registered them as the Canning children when they put them in the hotel.
Weird.
A few days later, he moved them again, this time to the Circle House, which was another hotel in the city. He's like shuttling them everywhere.
They must have been like, what the fuck is going on?
They were so they were like, what the fuck is happening here? Like, I just want to go home.
And Alice, I feel like, was on to him a
oh,
little
she
bit.
was like, what the fuck is going on? Now, even though he was on the run from many law enforcement agencies, many,
a multitude.
he made time during this whole thing to attempt another scam.
What?
While they were in Indianapolis, Holmes and Georgiana began touring properties with a realtor. This realtor thought that they were a couple who wanted to buy a house in the city.
Yeah.
Holmes had told the realtor that his wife had inherited some property and they were planning to trade the title to that property for something in Indianapolis that he could then sell for cash.
Okay.
This sounded insane to me when I read it, but apparently the bank had already approved this exchange, like in reality.
Weird.
The problem, however, was that the offer had an October 10th expiration date.
Okay.
And the property wouldn't have officially been accessible to Georgiana until her 25th birthday, which was not until October 17th.
Oh, shit.
So Holmes abandoned the realtor and never went through with the plan. But he was planning to try to go through with this before it was going to be legal. And after he was arrested, the realtor who was scammed here told the press, quote, Holmes was a good-looking fellow, but had a kind of uneasy look in his eyes. So he tried to fuck over this other person while he's on the run, like the heat is on.
The heat is like...
The heat is on.
It's more than on.
It's real on.
It's a fire.
While he toured the city with Georgiana, trying to set up some other schemes, the Pitezel children were just spending their time in a hotel room alone.
That's so sad.
And during this time, they were writing daily to their mom in St. Louis, and they were concerned because they never received anything back. And on October 6th, at one point, Alice wrote to her mother and said, "Why don't you write to me? I have not got a letter from you since I have been away, and it will be 3 weeks day after tomorrow." Carrie Pitezel had been writing to her children. She had written back to every single letter. Holmes just kept them.
What?
He just
like
kept them
mind
from the kids
games?
just to fuck with the kids.
Why would you even do that?
Because he's an
is
actual
evil.
monster.
Evil.
Yeah. So in
That's
October,
so sad. They're mourning the loss of their father, being shuttled to all these new places, and now they think their mom just abandoned them. Holy
like it's
fuck.
awful. He is like truly torturing them.
And I feel as though it's going to escalate, and
Yeah.
I just can't believe that's their last days.
Yeah. Holmes went to a realtor. Why can I never say realty? Realty?
Realty?
Realty.
Realty.
Why can I not say that word? That tripped me
I
up
don't
in the
know.
last one, I
It
think.
did, yeah.
Right?
Some
Realty.
people say realtor, but it's just realtor.
Realty.
I think.
Realty. That's what it is.
Realty.
A realty office.
It's losing all meaning, but
It really is. I don't know. Sorry, everybody. I don't know why my brain knows it, but my mouth won't say it.
Say a real estate office. It's
A real
easier.
estate office in Irvington, which is a suburb of Indianapolis.
Yeah.
And he started making arrangements to rent a house called the
Okay.
Lancaster House. It was a small cottage on Union Avenue.
I would not rent that house.
He got very hostile, which was rare for him to do in public because remember, he is
Mr. Cool, Calm, and
losing
Collected.
it now at this point because he was demanding the keys be given to him now. And he was like, I'm in a big hurry. I need them now. I'm not going through any of the shit I have to go through, like lost his mind. And the realtor, there you go,
Hey.
later said, quote, I remember the man very well because I did not like his manner. I felt that he should have had more respect for my gray hairs.
That's amazing.
I love
They were like,
that.
respect your elders.
He's like, I'm old.
Fuck
I don't know
you.
why he was mean. But a few days later, Holmes had a large oak stove delivered to Lancaster House because he did rent it, and also dropped off a case of surgical tools in town to be sharpened.
A large oak stove and sharpened surgical tools. That
Yep.
sounds normal.
So everything's fine.
Oh no.
In the afternoon in early October, Holmes brought Howard Pitezel in his trunk of belongings. Howard is the 10-year-old son.
Yep.
Belongings to the Lancaster House. And according to his confession later, they arrived a little after 8 p.m. and Holmes called Howard into the house. And he told him that he had to go to bed at once. And then he said he gave him the fatal dose of medicine. And he said he like poisoned him,
Yeah.
essentially. And he said as soon as he had ceased to breathe, I cut his body into pieces that would pass through the door of the stove, and by the combined use of gas and corn cobs, and proceeded to burn it with as little feeling as though it had been some inanimate object.
What?
That
the
was his own
fuck?
confession.
That's a 10-year-old.
I poisoned this 10-year-old boy, and I cut up his body and then put him in a stove, and I felt such little feelings about it that he might have been, well, it's been an inanimate object.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So it's most likely that he had poisoned his food to kill him. That's what everybody thinks.
Poor sweetie.
When they searched the property after he was arrested, they found a bottle of cyanide, an amount of wolfsbane, and there was also, he had purchased a cocaine solution from a pharmacist a few days earlier. Once he had disposed of Howard's body, he went back at the train station by 9 p.m. So that all happened within an hour, according to him. And he got his mail, and he boarded a train for Chicago. So the next day, and I don't know what he did there, but he returned to Indianapolis the next day. And he got Georgiana and the other children and put them on separate trains, Georgiana on one, children on the other, bound for Detroit.
We're going to Michigan.
So when they were going to Michigan,
I'm like, why are we going another place?
when they arrived in Detroit, Holmes checked himself and Georgiana into the Hotel Normandy under the name G. Howell and wife. I love that back then you didn't need a name as a wife. You were just wife.
Wife, yeah.
And then went
Bullshit.
to like, we don't need your name. And they went a few blocks away and checked Nellie and Alice into the New Western Hotel. Then the next day, they moved them to a boarding house run by a woman named May Ralston. Holmes was definitely starting to fray at the seams. He was starting to come apart. The children were starting to lose it, being alone all the time, not understanding where Howard is now, not understanding what's going on. He's dragging them all over the place, leaving them all alone for days at a time. Alice wrote letters to her grandparents, and on October 14th, she wrote, "We have to stay in all the time. Howard is not with us right now. All that Nell and I can do is draw, and I get so tired sitting that I could get up and fly almost. I'm getting so homesick that I don't know what to do."
I wish they had just run away.
Now, a day after she sent that letter, Carrie and Wharton Pitezel, Wharton was the younger son that was sick, they arrived in Detroit and checked into a hotel just a few blocks away from the boarding house where they didn't know that Alice and Nellie were staying.
Holy shit.
Holmes had written Carrie telling her to come there where she could finally be reunited with Benjamin and her children.
Oh my God.
When they
what
got
the
there,
fuck is wrong with
he's
this guy?
fucking awful. When they got there, he goes, "Oop, sorry, can't reunite you yet because it's like too heavily populated here, so you're gonna have to wait a little longer."
Oh my God. He is just fucked up.
A few days after coming to Detroit, he rented a small house on East Forest Avenue, which he told the landlord was for his sister and her children,
Okay.
which he was probably going to pass Georgiana and the kids off.
Yep.
He then dug a 4-foot by 3-foot hole in the backyard.
Okay.
Neighbors noticed. So this was clearly where he was intending to kill Alice and Nellie. No one is sure why, but he decided not to murder the girls there at this time. Instead, he told Carrie Pitezel that Benjamin was waiting for her now in Toronto, Canada, and she should travel there. And he was going to, and so he sent Alice and Nellie back to Indianapolis, where they were going to be waiting for them when she and Benjamin returned from Canada.
Okay.
This is when Carrie was like,
What the
what
fuck
the is going on? And she was concerned. And this is when she was like, where the fuck are my kids? Like, where are they? And he was like, don't worry, they're being cared for by a widow lady. But he wouldn't give any more details.
Yeah, that sounds totally fine.
Now, as all of
poor
this
woman.
is unraveling and he's losing complete control of this situation, clearly.
I also just feel like he's going insane.
Oh,
at this
he is.
point.
It seems like he's going mad.
Because he's just doing, like, none of this makes any sense.
It's chess moves that make no sense at all.
Right.
He's just sending her up there. He doesn't know what
He was just making a bunch of lateral moves.
Yeah, and he was definitely intending to kill Nellie and Alice
Of
in that
course.
house in Detroit. But then he didn't. I don't know why.
I wonder if one of the neighbors, like, came by or something.
I wonder if a neighbor saw him digging, you're right, and was like,
Hey, what are you
what's that
doing?
about? And he was
Right.
like, oh, nothing. But Detective Gary had
Why
enlisted.
is that so funny?
And Detective Gary is like the real MVP here because he got the Pinkerton Detective Agency on the case.
Shit.
And they had made a lot of progress in finding Holmes. They'd narrowed him down to the Detroit area. And this is why I believe maybe he left. Like, it could have been that he was planning to kill them.
Or the
and
police
then
were coming in
leave,
hot.
But I think they came a little hotter.
Sure.
I don't know how aware he became of that situation, but thinking now, like the fact that he moved so quickly out of there,
It
I
seems
think
like he may have
was
been.
tipped off somehow. And that's probably why he abandoned the whole plan.
Maybe he saw some kind of police presence.
He could have. So they made it to Canada. And as soon as they got there, Holmes checked Carey and Wharton into the Union House under the name Mrs. Adams. Then he disappointed them again. And he said, "Ooh, you just missed Benjamin." He said Benjamin had received word of detectives looking for him in the city, and he had actually fled to Montreal now.
Oh my God.
And Holmes then returned to the train station. He got Alice and Nellie at the train station and brought the girls to the house he'd rented on Vincent Street. And he told the neighbors he had rented this one for his sister as well, who was going to be coming from Hamilton, Ontario.
And this is a different house than the
Different
one he
house.
dug the
Yeah.
shit. Okay.
The house had been rented on a 6-month lease, and the neighbors later told investigators they thought it was real strange that the man had rented the entire house, yet he only had a bed frame, a trunk, and a mattress a dog wouldn't even sleep on.
Oh, what does that mean?
So Holmes then got Georgiana at the train station, and they went off to Niagara Falls, where they stayed one night in the Imperial Hotel before they went back to Toronto and checked into the Palmer House Hotel as H. Howell and wife.
Oh, the Palmer house is super haunted.
There you go. Probably from him.
Probs.
So on October 24th, Holmes went to the house on Vincent Street where he put Nellie and Alice. He borrowed a shovel from a neighbor, telling him, "I'm going to fix a place in the cellar to hold potatoes."
The fuck?
And he went into the basement of the house and dug a fresh grave.
No.
After he did this, he went back to Carrie Pitezel and told her, "Oh, shit. Howard's not there yet." And he said, "Oh, you got to go to Ogdensburg, New York," because Benjamin had fled there now.
At this point, I'd be like, you're not sending me another fucking place.
Nope, but he put Carrie on the train.
But she also misses her husband, so
and she's
she's
just
and her
trying to get her
children.
family back together.
God.
Puts Carrie on the train, and he went back to the Vincent Street house. Holmes was, strangely, when he confessed to this, he was less sensational than he normally is.
Really?
The story of Nellie and Alice's murders is less dramatic and less, he was less excited to tell this story, I feel.
Huh.
In his confession, he said he had taken a large trunk to the house on Vincent Street. He'd cut a small hole in the trunk large enough for a hose to fit.
Uh-huh.
This is pretty awful.
It
Just
sounds
wanna
like
put
it
that.
will be.
He wouldn't explain how, but he got both girls in the trunk
Alive.
And he, quote, ended their lives by connecting the gas with the trunk. So he gassed them in a trunk.
Holy fuck.
Once they were killed, he opened the trunk and he found them, in his words, quote, their little blackened and distorted faces.
Oh my God.
So he then took them out of the trunk. He stripped them of their clothing, then buried their bodies in the grave in the basement in the Vincent house.
Oh my God.
And he said, quote, without a particle of covering save the cold earth, which I heaped upon them with fiendish delight. That's the only time he got
He just gassed 2 children to death and then
2 little girls.
buried them in fiendish delight. Mm-hmm. I don't know how he dies, but I hope they did something brutal to him.
Well, and what's worse is, so you listen to that story and you're like, that's fucking terrible.
Yeah.
But Adam Seltzer, he says there's a problem with that story. And he said he did kill these little girls.
Of course.
But that house on Vincent Street was not set up for gas. And so he says the claim of poisoning them with gas was probably not true unless he did it somewhere else.
Okay.
And then what's worse is that he was like, he probably poisoned their food like he did Howard, but then he just told this story.
That's even worse.
Which is even worse. And he's like, no matter what, he brutally killed 2 little girls and buried them in the basement.
right.
But the fact that he is making up a
Like, that's already
grosser
terrible,
story
yeah.
from something that's even gross, still gross, is like, you just wanted to tell that story? Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Well, I wonder if it's almost he can't, now that he's in prison and he knows he's got, he can't kill anybody anymore. So now he's killing people differently in his mind.
yeah,
to,
he's living
live that.
vicariously through his own fantasies. So he's just
Exactly.
going with it. It's
Exactly.
like, wow, dude.
That is,
Yeah.
what the fuck did he have?
Yeah.
Like,
Seriously,
what was wrong
what
with
was
him?
going on with him? Now, the next day, he returned the shovel to the neighbor, and then he stuffed the girls' clothing and any belongings they had into the chimney and put a fire in the fireplace to try to burn them all.
So sad.
But unfortunately for him, he'd packed the items too tightly into the chimney, so large pieces of clothing were still in there even after the fire went out.
Oh, damn. And he didn't realize it?
No. Also, the stupid idiot hadn't even been very thorough when he gathered up their belongings because he had ended up leaving several of Alice's belongings, including a bag, out in the apartment when he left.
And you can't imagine she even had that many
No.
belongings at that point.
Exactly. By the time the new tenants arrived a few days later,
Oh my God.
they found the random clothing scraps and remnants left behind. But by this point, Holmes
out of
was
town.
back and he had already left Toronto and he wasn't coming back.
And is he the landlord of that house or no? He just rented it?
No, he just
So
rented
no,
it
okay.
just to do that. Now, eventually, this man would tell so many stories about the missing children, it would be almost like it's something out of fiction. He would say Benjamin, the father, was in South America. He told Carrie the kids were in South America. He told them now they were in Chicago, in Detroit, they were in England. They were anywhere else but reality.
He was just
Dead.
driving her insane.
Yeah, he was trying to drive her insane. And that is where we're going to leave part 4.
I did not see that coming.
Because
What?
because he should
Because
have
what?
he should have stayed in Canada and he didn't.
Okay, I'm
And
happy to know that.
Once he returns to the United States, that's when shit is going to go down for him. And I don't want to start the going down process.
no, I
would
get
like
that.
I would like episode 5 to just be us all high-fiving in the fact that this motherfucker gets got.
Oh, I can't wait to hear how. Because
So-
I don't have any idea
Yeah.
how he gets caught or what happens to him after
Yep.
he's caught.
So this is him. He's leaving Toronto. He's leaving Canada. He's coming back to the United States like a big fucking idiot.
Yup.
He has killed kids in Canada. He's killed kids in the United States. He has killed women in the United States.
Yup.
He has now killed a man in the United States. And he's coming back. And the Pinkerton Detective Agency guys, they're on his fucking tail.
I'm so excited.
They're right here. He would have been much better off staying in Canada.
Oh,
He should have
thank
just-
goodness he didn't.
Thank
though.
goodness he's a fucking idiot. I'm
Right.
so glad he is.
Oh,
So we're
man.
going to talk about his arrest. We're going to talk about the trial. We're going to talk about the wild confession. And we're going to talk about the theories that he is Jack the Ripper, which I don't agree with.
But we'll talk about it.
But the theories, when you put them out there, you can understand why people are go with them.
Interested, at
They're
least.
slightly compelling,
Okay.
but very interesting. And we're going to talk about his execution.
Ah,
It's all coming in part 5.
it's all happening, Sheena Shea.
The end. The climax of this series is part 5.
My goodness.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we hope you keep listening, and we hope you
Keep
it
weird.
but not so weird that you go all around the world doing H.H. Holmes type shit. Because, like, don't.
Keep it so weird that you're Detective Gary.
Yeah, just be a detective.
Keep it that
In a
weird.
world full of H.H. Holmeses, be a Detective Gary. And with that, we leave you.